Today, we catch up with Jordan, a hospice registered nurse working in the high desert region of Southern California, which includes Victorville, Hesperia, and more. So, Jordan, you're assigned to work in the rural areas of the high desert. What has been your experience?
Madness. Just absurdity and sincerity on the deepest of regions. Um, yeah, I'm the only male that works on my team. So typically with that, I end up going to the areas that aren't as safe and a little more just peculiar people. I get sent out to Lucerne Valley and Johnson Valley and just deep in the recessions of the desert where people kind of crawl into to secede from society. So definitely a lot of bizarre, highly interesting people.
So, you had mentioned there's a lot of different kind of people, like a lot of creative people, artists, and maybe
Sure.
hippie types, and also very extreme personalities like
Backwards.
neo-Nazis.
Absolutely, yeah. When you're going out to those regions, like I said, it's people who are essentially too extreme to be in the confines of our society. So they go out there to, either cook crystal meth and be Nazis, or they go out there to just be alone with their art and the beauty of the nature. And when I grew up in the desert, always thought it was beautiful, but I think that, definitely meeting some of these people who are brilliant minds who choose to be out there kind of help me see a new beauty in the desert. I have college professors and famous artists that choose to kind of withdraw from normal society, withdraw from LA and end up in an isolated area like Lucerne Valley. So definitely, some of the houses I walk into, it's there's always amazing paintings everywhere, not just beautiful. And then some of these houses, it's just straight up Adolf Hitler portraits on the walls, swastikas. That doesn't happen often, but it does happen. I've had it more than a dozen times, but I've also been doing this for 12 years. So I deal with a lot of racists, but only like a dozen that actually went to the length of having swastikas on the walls. So yeah.
But how did you get into your profession?
Okay, so when I was a teenager, I wanted to be a firefighter, and the core of that idea was essentially because I wanted to have a job where I helped people, and made enough money to have a decent life. And when I got into it, I had a personal trainer. I took all the classes that you could take. My personal trainer was brighter and stronger than I will ever be, and he was a volunteer firefighter at that point, like 7-8 years. It's highly competitive, and I knew some people in the fire program that were kind of pivoting to nursing. At first, you think about gender constructs. It kind of is bizarre to me that these macho men were choosing to go to nursing over fire, but it kind of rewired my brain a little bit. It's a field with decent pay and rewarding work. We get to help people 40 hours a week, so it's definitely rewarding. So yeah, and hospice, as far as hospice goes, I switched from fire to nursing. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I figured, I'll get my CNA to kind of work my way up, see if I like it. After I finished CNA, I heard people just talking about how hospice is very flexible and it pays good because hospital, you show up, you're there for 12 hours. Hospice, you can do 1 or 2 visits before a class, go to class, and go see a few more patients afterwards. So I got my CNA, did that, and ended up at first because I was 20 years old. At the first Christmas party, I was so young, my boss took my drink away from me. So I'm showing up to these people's houses. They're expecting a professional person, and I'm a little boy showing up. So at first, I thought I was doing a really bad job. I was getting a lot of complaints when I first started from patients. And, I was talking to one of my patients who kind of seems like me. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. He's like, grow a beard. I was like, yeah, like I shaved to be professional. He's like, you look like a little boy. Grow a beard, people will trust you. So I grew a beard, and I don't really get complaints anymore. They all kind of love me. So yeah,
What dangerous encounters have you had?
a lot. So like I said, I'm the one that they send to the places where they have male only teams to essentially to where we're going to really dangerous places, and they don't want to send any of the females. There was one time that we were in an area where there was a lot of drug trafficking and whatnot, and I get out to my car, and I guess sometimes I'm kind of naive or oblivious, so I get out to my car, and I'm just kind of charting my note on my tablet, and I look over, and there's a man standing there. He lifts up his shirt, flashes a pistol at me. I'm like, that's my cue to leave. I didn't escalate more than that, but yeah, definitely we get sent into really shady areas. I had another situation where my patient, he had very progressive Alzheimer's, and his brain was just, so far gone, but his body was still there, and he was a strong man. He was a boxer and a construction worker. One day he kind of snapped, and he grabbed a large kitchen knife and chased me around the house. This guy was very immobile on his feet, and he was chasing me and his wife around the house. And I definitely, it took about 15 minutes or so to de-escalate that situation. I didn't want to call the police. I was afraid he would get shot. I essentially was just dragging their dining table throughout the entire house, keeping the dining table, his wife behind me and him in front of me, and the dining table between us. And then, I was just trying to talk softly and calmly to him. And that was like the longest 10 or 15 minutes of my life. And then, at one point, after talking to him for a long time, he put the knife down on the table and slid it across to me. It was terrifying.
That is stressful.
It's very stressful.
Yeah. I mean, like, so you've been on the front lines, before COVID, and when COVID hit, you're on like double front lines, and that must have been really stressful.
Yeah, it was very stressful. It was a combination of things. A lot of times when a person is in the process of passing away, they spike a temperature. So, it's like your COVID screenings are so confusing because it's like, does this person have COVID, or are they just following the natural process of dying? There's a few things that kind of correlate between the two. When it first started, there was such a shortage of PPE that we could really only spare using, the gowns, N95 masks, the real protection against, patients with confirmed cases only. Besides that, the patients that were, not confirmed, we essentially had to use just surgical masks. That's all related to the shortage of PPE. It was, horrible. They were just getting hand sanitizer was so hard. They would ration out 10 sanitizer wipes to us at a time, different stuff like that. It's, definitely that part of it was stressful. I pretty much essentially accepted the fact that I was eventually going to get COVID, which we did, and my wife and myself were pretty lucky with how we recovered. But yeah, there was the stresses of catching it, the stresses of, my family. I was afraid I was going to take it from from work to my family. I was afraid I was going to take it from my family to work, and especially with, such minimal PPE. After, a little later into it, they were actually able to, bump up our protections with, now we're in full gowns, N95, face shield, gloves, the whole. It's I'm all for it because it's protecting people, but it is miserable in that sweatsuit. Yeah, so I don't know. And then just another thing was we had like a rush of people that, between like say 50 and 65 that were otherwise healthy, months before they got COVID, and they didn't, they recovered from COVID, but were left so damaged that they're now on hospice. So they got through the infection, but now their lungs are messed up, and they're on hospice with respiratory failure because they had COVID. And seeing 56-year-old people, that had me so freaked out about my family. It's almost like a homicide detective. It was like, if you're a homicide detective, you probably every day just think that your family is going to get murdered because that's what you think is normal. And for me, just being around that all the time, I was highly anxious about my family.
Wow. So I mean, your line of work can be really emotional and stressful. What has been rewarding?
Rewarding is getting invited to a family barbecue like 10 years after having a patient. I'm 12 years in hospice now. Rewarding is, when people are grieving, a lot of times they don't always think outwardly. If a person's grieving, they're not going to think to like, a lot of times they're not going to think to, tell me how awesome I did or whatever, because they're so overwhelmed with their own grief. But, here and there, I'll get a letter from a family, afterwards, that tells me, how amazing I was and how I, changed their lives forever. And, that's a really big deal. There's some letters that I have that I will keep for the rest of my life. And just definitely, I make friendships through it. I make, like I said, 8-10 years later, I'm getting invited to barbecues. It's really cool. It's definitely a very high emotional job, and it's both rewarding and very, very difficult. And we kind of have a tendency of getting a little bit numb to the stuff that we're exposed to. And then, maybe once every couple of years, all of a sudden I wake up at 3 a.m. sobbing. So it's kind of we build, a little bit of walls. We build our walls because when we're initiated in this relationship, the nurse and the patient, typically we know how it's going to end. So you definitely do kind of put up a little bit of guard. But I do like to get involved with my families, maybe a little more than I should. But we definitely build walls. And that actually led to one interesting situation for me. That was one of the most difficult situations I ever had with a patient. I got a patient, he comes on, he's mid-60s, so, kind of young, a little more youthful in the way he talks. And I met him, I became pretty tight with him, but I also, knew how that relationship was going to end. I also became pretty tight with his wife, and then the patient passed away, and then, just everything kind of, went on. And then one day I'm checking the admission report, and I see his wife's name. And I was still in contact with her, and I was not aware that she had any illnesses. And one day she essentially just woke up and she was like paralyzed, and she didn't realize that she had cancer on her spine. So she goes from pretty much a healthy person walking to then another day she's like paralyzed and miserable and not used. She's used to going to the store and going, and I think that, so I ended up being her case manager. I think one of the reasons I made that one so difficult is because when I was introduced to her, I didn't have that barrier up, because like I'm introduced to somebody else and I know how the relationship's going to end, but that's not how I anticipated mine and her relationship ending. And this is I was pretty tight with her when she was, on her way out, and she actually begged me several times to help her pass away, to help her essentially overdose on medications. And that's kind of a controversial subject. After being in hospice for 12 years, I'm definitely for that right, absolutely for that right. But at that time, that was not legal. That wasn't even, beginning to be legislated. So I still oddly kind of feel guilty for not helping her with that. But yeah, it was definitely a hard situation being tight with her and not knowing that, that I was actually gonna have to, help her pass away as well. So as far as, you know, hospice services. So.
Wow. Wow, Jordan. Well, it was great talking with you, and I enjoyed, hearing about your experience. And I thank you for your service and your service to the community.
Thank
And
you, Elliot. That's very kind of you.
I hope to talk to you again soon. And thank you.
I love that. All right. Thank you, Elliot.